The notification sound on my phone cut through the silence of my apartment like a blade. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I was grading papers for my third-grade class when the message appeared on my screen. The sender's name made my blood turn to ice. Dad. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My father had been dead for 10 years. I had watched them lower his casket into the ground on a rainy October morning in 2014. I had thrown dirt on his grave. I had cried myself to sleep for months afterward. And now, somehow, impossibly, there was a text message from him glowing on my phone screen. Meet me at Rosewood Café tomorrow at 2 p.m. We need to talk, Melody. It's time you know the truth. My hands started shaking so violently that I nearly dropped the phone. This had to be some sick joke. Maybe one of my students had gotten hold of my number and was pranking me. But how would they know about my father? How would they know about the cafe where he used to take me for hot chocolate every Sunday after church? I stared at that message until my eyes burned. The timestamp showed it had been sent just moments ago. My father, Marcus Wellington, had supposedly died of a heart attack at age 52 while on a business trip to Portland. His colleagues found him in his hotel room. The funeral was closed casket because of the condition of his body, they said. My mother, Ruth, had been devastated. We both were. But here was his name, his contact information that I had never been able to bring myself to delete, sending me messages from beyond the grave. My first instinct was to call my mother, but it was nearly midnight and she had been struggling with insomnia since her recent retirement. Instead, I found myself scrolling up through our old text conversations, messages that ended abruptly in September 2014, just weeks before his supposed death. The last message I had sent him was about my new teaching job. Got the position at Maplewood Elementary. Thanks for believing in me, Dad. He had responded with a simple heart emoji and proud of you, sweetheart. Now, 10 years later, he wanted to meet at Rosewood Café. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face at my college graduation, beaming with pride as I walked across the stage. I remembered his laugh, the way he would ruffle my hair even when I was 22 and complained about it. I remembered the last time I saw him alive, or what I thought was the last time, when he hugged me goodbye before leaving for that business trip. "Take care of your mother while I'm gone, Mel," he had said. "You're all she's got." But I wasn't all she had. She had him. Or so we thought. Morning came with a heavy gray sky that matched my mood. I called in sick to school, something I had only done twice in my 5 years of teaching. My principal, Mrs. Chen, was understanding when I told her it was a family emergency. If only she knew how true that was. I spent the morning researching everything I could about digital afterlife services, posthumous message scheduling, and elaborate pranks. But nothing explained how someone could send a real-time text message from a phone that should have been buried with its owner or destroyed years ago. At 1:30 p.m., I drove to Rosewood Café with my heart hammering against my ribs. The little coffee shop sat on the corner of Fifth and Maple, exactly where it had been 10 years ago, though it had undergone renovations since then. The cheerful yellow walls and checkered tablecloths had been replaced with exposed brick and industrial lighting, but the smell of freshly ground coffee beans was exactly the same. I ordered a latte and chose a table near the window where I could see anyone coming or going. My phone sat on the table in front of me, screen up, waiting for another impossible message. At exactly 2 p.m., a man walked through the door. My coffee cup slipped from my hands and shattered against the floor. It was my father. Older, grayer, with lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, but unmistakably him. He had the same crooked smile, the same way of running his hand through his hair when he was nervous. He wore a dark blue sweater that I didn't recognize and jeans that looked new. He spotted me immediately and walked over, his footsteps echoing in my ears like gunshots. "Hello, Melody," he said, his voice exactly as I remembered it. "You look beautiful, just like your mother." I couldn't speak, I couldn't breathe. The entire cafe seemed to spin around me as he pulled out the chair across from me and sat down as if this was the most natural thing in the world. "I know you have questions," he continued, signaling to the barista for coffee. And I know this is a shock, but I need you to listen to me very carefully because we don't have much time. You're dead, I whispered, my voice cracking. I was at your funeral. I threw dirt on your grave. His face crumpled with what looked like genuine pain. I know, sweetheart, and I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry for what I put you and your mother through. But I had to do it. I had to disappear. Had to? My voice was getting louder, drawing stares from other customers. Had to? Do you have any idea what you did to us? Mom didn't speak for 3 months after you died. 3 months. She lost 30 pounds. I had to move back home to take care of her because she forgot to eat, forgot to shower, forgot how to function. Melody, please keep your voice down. He glanced nervously around the cafe. I know I hurt you both. I know there's no excuse for what I did. But if I hadn't disappeared, we all would have ended up dead, for real. The barista brought him coffee, black, the way he always drank it. He wrapped his hands around the mug and took a sip, and for a moment, it was like stepping back in time. How many Sundays had we sat in this very cafe? Him with his black coffee, and me with my hot chocolate topped with whipped cream. What are you talking about? I demanded. What do you mean we all would have ended up dead? He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something in his eyes that I had never seen when I was growing up. Fear. Deep, bone-chilling fear. I was never really a financial consultant, Mel. That was just my cover story. My real job was much more dangerous. And when things went wrong, the only way to protect you and your mother was to disappear completely. Cover story? I felt like Alice falling down the rabbit hole. What are you talking about? I've been to your office. I met your colleagues. They were all part of it. The office, the colleagues, the business trips, all of it was carefully constructed to give me a normal life to come home to. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. I worked for the federal government, Melody. I was an undercover agent investigating financial crimes, specifically money laundering operations connected to organized crime. I stared at him in disbelief. My father, who had taught me to ride a bicycle and helped me with algebra homework and cried at my high school graduation, was claiming to be some kind of secret agent. That's insane, I said. You're making this up. This whole thing is some elaborate joke, or you've had a mental breakdown or something. I wish it were that simple. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small leather wallet. Inside was an official-looking badge and identification card with his photo and the seal of the Department of Treasury. I was a special agent with the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. For 15 years, I infiltrated money laundering operations, gathering evidence and building cases against some very dangerous people. I took the wallet with trembling hands. The ID looked real, official. The photo was definitely him, though younger than he appeared now. The name on the card read Marcus J. Wellington, Special Agent. This could be fake, I said, but even as I said it, I was starting to believe him. Too many things from my childhood suddenly made sense. The mysterious phone calls he would take in his study with the door closed. The business trips that seemed to follow no particular pattern.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
The way he would sometimes seem distracted, worried, like he was carrying the weight of the world. In 2014, I was working on the biggest case of my career, he continued. A money laundering operation that stretched from New York to Los Angeles, involving multiple crime families and corrupt officials. We were close to making arrests when someone leaked information about my identity to the targets. What kind of information? Everything. My real name, my address, my family, your name, Melody, your mother's name, where you worked, where you lived, your daily routines. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. They had photos of you leaving your apartment, photos of your mother at the grocery store. They were planning to use both of you as leverage against me. The cafe suddenly felt cold, despite the warm October afternoon. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to process what he was telling me. My handler gave me 24 hours to extract my family and enter witness protection, or they would handle the situation themselves by placing us all in protective custody indefinitely. But I knew that even witness protection wasn't guaranteed to keep you safe. These people had resources, connections. They had already demonstrated that they could penetrate law enforcement operations. So you decided to fake your death instead? It was the only way to make sure you were truly safe. If Marcus Wellington was dead, there would be no reason for anyone to threaten his family. You and your mother could go on with your lives, free from the shadow of my work. I felt tears streaming down my face. But we weren't free. We were devastated. Mom aged 10 years in those first 6 months after you died. I had panic attacks for over a year. We were both in therapy. I know, and I'm sorry. I watched from a distance. I saw how much you both suffered, and it nearly killed me. There were so many times I wanted to reveal myself, to comfort you both, but I couldn't risk it. Not until now. What changed? Why now? He was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee. When he looked up, his eyes were filled with a sadness so profound it took my breath away. Your mother is in danger, Melody. They've found us again. The world seemed to tilt sideways. What do you mean, they've found us? Who's found us? The same organization I was investigating 10 years ago. They never really went away. They just went underground. And now they're active again, bigger than before. 3 days ago, my former handler contacted me through emergency channels. Someone has been asking questions about the old investigation, about me, about my family. I felt sick to my stomach. What kind of questions? The kind that suggests they know I'm still alive. And if they know that, then they know that faking my death was a deception, which means they'll come after you and your mother to get to me. This is insane, I said, standing up so quickly that my chair fell over. Several customers turned to look at us. This is absolutely insane. You can't just show up after 10 years and tell me that some criminal organization is after us. I don't even know if you're really my father or some con artist who's been stalking my family. He stood up as well, moving with a fluid grace that I had never noticed before. Ask me something only your father would know. Ask me anything. I thought for a moment, my mind racing. What did you give me for my 16th birthday? A silver locket with your grandmother's photo inside. But you lost it 2 weeks later at the beach, and you were too afraid to tell me because you thought I'd be angry. I pretended not to notice for months until you finally confessed, and then I told you that your grandmother would have wanted her memory to be set free by the ocean. The memory hit me like a physical blow. I had never told anyone about losing that locket, not even my mother. I had carried the guilt for years, until finally working up the courage to tell him. What about when I was 8 and had pneumonia? You were hospitalized for 4 days. I slept in the chair next to your bed every night, and we watched the same Disney movie 17 times because it was the only thing that made you feel better. The Little Mermaid. I still know every song by heart. I sank back into my chair, the fight going out of me. This was really him. My father, who had been dead for 10 years, was sitting across from me in a coffee shop telling me that our lives were in danger. I need you to listen very carefully, he said, reaching across the table to take my hand. His skin was warm, real, alive. I'm going to give you a phone number. It's a secure line that connects directly to my handler at the Treasury Department. If anything happens to me, if anyone approaches you or your mother, if you notice anything unusual at all, you call that number immediately. He pulled a piece of paper from his pocket and slid it across the table. The number was written in his familiar handwriting, the same careful script that had signed my report cards and birthday cards. What do you mean, if anything happens to you? Where are you going? I have to disappear again, Melody. The fact that I'm here now, talking to you, puts both of us at risk. But I had to see you. I had to make sure you knew the truth in case something happens. No, I said firmly. No, you don't get to do this again. You don't get to walk back into my life just to disappear again. I won't let you. Sweetheart, you don't understand. These people don't just kill their targets, they make them suffer first. They go after families, children, anyone they can use as leverage. I won't let that happen to you or your mother. Then don't leave us. Stay and fight. We can figure this out together. He smiled, but it was heartbreaking. You sound just like your mother. She always believed that love could conquer everything. Maybe it can. Maybe it can, he agreed. But not this time. This time, love means keeping my distance. We sat in silence, surrounded by the normal sounds of the cafe. People typing on laptops, the hiss of the espresso machine, quiet conversations about work and weather and weekend plans. Normal life continuing while my world was being turned upside down. "I need you to do something for me," he said finally, reaching across the table to take my hand. His skin was warm, real, alive. "I need you to go to your mother's house tonight. Don't call first, just go. Pack a bag for both of you, enough for a few days. Tell her you're taking her on a spontaneous mother-daughter getaway, somewhere she's always wanted to visit." "You want us to run?" "I want you to be somewhere else while I handle the situation. Somewhere safe, somewhere they won't think to look for you." I thought about my mother, now 67 years old and looking forward to her retirement years. She had started painting again, recently, something she hadn't done since before I was born. She had joined a book club and was talking about taking a cruise with her sister. She deserved peace, not this nightmare. "How do I know you're telling the truth about any of this?" I asked. "How do I know this isn't all some elaborate delusion?" He was quiet for a moment, then pulled out his phone. "I'm going to show you something, but I need you to promise me that you won't try to investigate this on your own. Promise me you'll take your mother and get somewhere safe." "I can't promise that without knowing what you're going to show me."
"Then I can't show you." We stared at each other across the table, locked in a standoff that felt achingly familiar. I had inherited his stubbornness, something my mother had pointed out countless times over the years. "Fine," I said, finally. "I promise." He scrolled through his phone and turned the screen toward me. It was a news article from 3 days ago, headline reading, "Prominent businessman found dead in apparent suicide." The photo showed a man in his 50s with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "This is Special Agent David Crawford," my father said quietly. "He was my partner for 8 years. We worked dozens of cases together. 3 days ago, he was found dead in his car with a suicide note claiming he had been embezzling money from the government." I read the article quickly. The man had apparently left behind a wife and 2 teenage children. The suicide note detailed years of financial crimes and expressed remorse for his actions. "David Crawford was the most honest man I ever knew," my father continued. "He once turned in his own brother for tax evasion. There's no way he killed himself over embezzled money because there's no way he would have embezzled money in the first place." "You think he was murdered?" "I know he was murdered, and I know why. David was the only other person who knew all the details of the case I was working on 10 years ago. He was also the only person who knew I was still alive." The implications hit me like a truck. So if they killed him, then they're cleaning house, eliminating anyone who might have information about their operations, which means they're planning something big, something that requires absolute secrecy. I stared at the photo of the dead agent, this man who had been my father's partner and friend. He looked like someone's grandfather, someone who coached Little League and barbecued on weekends, not someone who would embezzle government money and kill himself in shame. "What was the original case about?" I asked. "What were you investigating that was so dangerous?" My father glanced around the cafe again, then leaned closer. "Have you ever heard of something called phantom banking?" I shook my head. "It's a way to move massive amounts of money without leaving traditional paper trails. Instead of using real banks, criminals create fake financial institutions that exist only on paper and in computer systems. They use these phantom banks to launder money from drug trafficking, arms dealing, human trafficking, any criminal enterprise that generates large amounts of cash. But surely the government would notice fake banks. That's the genius of it. The phantom banks are created using the identities of real but dormant financial institutions. Banks that went out of business decades ago, or small credit unions that exist but don't actively monitor their federal registrations. The criminals file false paperwork claiming to have purchased or merged with these institutions, then use their federal identification numbers to create accounts and process transactions. He paused to take a sip of coffee, and I noticed his hands were shaking slightly. The operation I was investigating involved over 40 phantom banks across 12 states. They were processing nearly $2 billion per year in illegal transactions. But the really scary part wasn't the money laundering itself. It was who was using the system. Who? Everyone. Drug cartels, arms dealers, corrupt politicians, terrorist organizations. The phantom banking network had become a one-stop shop for anyone who needed to move dirty money quickly and quietly. We're talking about funding for everything from international drug trafficking to domestic terrorism. I felt overwhelmed by the scope of what he was describing. And you were trying to shut all this down by yourself? Not by myself. There was a task force of about 20 agents working on different aspects of the case, but I was the primary undercover operative. My job was to infiltrate the network by posing as a corrupt financial consultant who could help new clients set up phantom bank accounts. That's why you had the fake office and fake colleagues. Exactly. My cover story was that I was a legitimate financial consultant who had discovered how to exploit regulatory loopholes for wealthy clients who wanted to avoid taxes or hide assets from ex-wives. It gave me a reason to ask questions about the banking system without arousing suspicion. The pieces were starting to fit together. But something went wrong. Someone inside the task force was feeding information to the criminals. Every time we got close to making arrests, the targets would disappear or the evidence would be destroyed. It took us months to realize we had a mole. Did you find out who it was? His face darkened. We had our suspicions, but before we could investigate further, my cover was blown. Someone told the crime families that Marcus Wellington wasn't really a corrupt financial consultant. They knew I was a federal agent, and they knew everything about my family. I thought about this, trying to imagine my father living this double life while I was going about my normal routine of college classes and part-time jobs and dating disasters. So you faked your death to protect us? The agency wanted to put all of us in witness protection, but I knew that wouldn't be enough. As long as I was alive, you and your mother would be targets. The only way to truly protect you was to make sure Marcus Wellington was completely, permanently dead. But how did you do it? How do you fake a death convincing enough to fool the police and the coroner? He was quiet for a long moment. I had help from people in the agency, people who specialized in making inconvenient problems disappear. The heart attack in the hotel room was staged. The body in the coffin was not mine. I felt sick to my stomach. Whose body was it? A homeless man who had died of natural causes around the same time. Similar height and weight to me. The closed casket was because of supposed decomposition, but really it was to prevent anyone from looking too closely. The thought of throwing dirt on some stranger's grave while believing it was my father made me feel nauseous. That's horrible. I know it's horrible, but it worked. For 10 years, you and your mother were safe. You got to live normal lives. You became a teacher just like you always wanted. Your mother learned to paint again. You were free. We weren't free. We were broken. Do you have any idea what it's like to lose your father when you're 22 years old? Do you know what it's like to watch your mother cry herself to sleep every night for months? Tears were streaming down his face now. I watched, Melody. I was there. I never left town. I saw you graduate from your teaching program. I was at the back of the auditorium when you got your first classroom assignment. I've been to every school play you've directed, every parent-teacher conference night. I know about your apartment on Elm Street and your cat, Mr. Whiskers, and how you cry during Disney movies, just like you did when you were 8 years old. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. You've been watching us? From a distance. Always from a distance. I had to make sure you were safe, but I also had to make sure you never knew I was there. I struggled to find words. That's stalking. That's incredibly invasive and wrong. I know it was wrong, but I couldn't help myself. You're my daughter. You're the most important thing in my life, and I had to know that you were okay. I thought about all the times over the past 10 years when I had felt like someone was watching me.
Times when I would turn around in a crowded place with the strange sensation that familiar eyes were on me. I had always dismissed it as imagination or wishful thinking. "The man at my college graduation," I said suddenly, tall, gray-beard, sitting alone in the back row. He left before the ceremony ended. My father nodded miserably. "And at Mom's 60th birthday party at the restaurant, there was someone at the bar who looked like you from behind, but when I tried to get a closer look, he was gone." "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry, Melody. I never meant for any of this to happen." We sat in silence, both crying now. The other customers in the cafe were pointedly not looking at us, but I could feel their curiosity and concern. "Why now?" I asked finally. "Why reveal yourself now if it puts us in danger?" "Because the alternative is worse. The people who killed David Crawford, they're not just cleaning house, they're preparing for something. Our intelligence suggests they're planning to activate the phantom banking network again, but this time for something much bigger than money laundering." "What do you mean?" "We think they're planning to fund a major terrorist attack on American soil, something that would require moving hundreds of millions of dollars quickly and quietly. The phantom banking system would allow them to do that without detection." The scope of what he was telling me was beyond anything I could process. "And you think they'll come after us to get to you?" "I think they'll come after you to flush me out. If they can grab you or your mother, they know I'll do anything to get you back, including giving them information about how we dismantled their network the first time." I stared at him across the table, this man who was my father, but also a stranger, someone who had lived a secret life of danger and deception while I thought he sold insurance and worried about quarterly reports. "What do you want me to do?" "Take your mother somewhere safe. I'll give you a credit card with enough money for a few weeks. Don't use your own cards. Don't go anywhere predictable. Maybe that bed and breakfast in Maine that your mother always talks about visiting. And then what? We hide forever while you fight international criminals?" "I'm going to end this, Melody. I'm going to find out who the mole was in our task force and expose the whole network. But I need to know that you and your mother are safe while I do it." "What if something happens to you? What if this time you really do end up dead?" He reached across the table and took both of my hands in his. "Then at least I'll die knowing that I finally told you the truth, that I finally got to see you one more time and tell you how proud I am of the woman you've become." "Dad," I whispered, and it was the first time I had said that word aloud in 10 years. "I love you, sweetheart. I've loved you every day for the past 10 years, even when you thought I was gone. And I need you to know that everything I did to protect you and your mother. I know it was wrong. I know it caused you both tremendous pain, but I would do it again if it meant keeping you safe." I wanted to be angry with him. I wanted to scream and rage and tell him that he had no right to make these decisions for us. But looking into his eyes, seeing the genuine pain and love there, I found that what I felt most was grief. Grief for all the lost years, for all the conversations we never had, for all the moments he had witnessed from a distance but never been able to share. "I need time to process this," I said finally. "I need time to figure out how to tell Mom." "You have until tonight. I need you both out of town by tomorrow morning." "That's not enough time." "It has to be enough time, Melody, because if I'm right about what these people are planning, waiting any longer could get you both killed." He stood up from the table and pulled a small envelope from his jacket pocket. "This has the credit card, the phone number I told you about, and some other information you might need. Don't open it until you get home, and don't show it to anyone except your mother." "When will I see you again?" "I don't know. Maybe never. But if I survive this, if I manage to stop what they're planning, then maybe someday we can be a family again." He leaned down and kissed the top of my head, just like he used to when I was little. "Be safe, sweetheart. Take care of your mother, and remember that no matter what happens, no matter how long it's been since you've seen me, I'm always with you." Then he walked out of the cafe, leaving me alone with my shattered coffee cup and my shattered understanding of reality. I sat there for a long time staring at the envelope in my hands and trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. The father I had mourned for 10 years was alive. The quiet, safe life I thought I was living was actually built on a foundation of lies and danger. And now, somehow, I had to convince my mother to abandon her retirement dreams and go into hiding because of threats from international criminals. When I finally got up to leave, I noticed that the barista had quietly cleaned up the broken coffee cup and brought me a new latte. She smiled sympathetically as I passed the counter. "Family troubles?" she asked kindly. "Something like that," I replied. If only she knew. The drive to my mother's house passed in a blur. I kept checking my rearview mirror, paranoid that I was being followed, but the suburban streets looked exactly as they always did. Kids riding bicycles, neighbors walking dogs, retirees working in their gardens, normal life continuing while my world had been completely upended. My mother's house sat on a quiet cul-de-sac lined with oak trees. She had lived there for 30 years, first with my father and then alone after his supposed death. It was a modest 2-story colonial with blue shutters and a front porch where she grew tomatoes in pots every summer. She had her art studio, which used to be my father's home office. She had converted it after he died, painting the walls a warm yellow and filling it with canvases and easels and the smell of oil paints. She was working on a landscape, something with rolling hills and wildflowers. "Melody." She looked up with surprise and pleasure. "What a wonderful surprise! I was just thinking about you." She looked younger than her 67 years, with silver hair that she wore in a neat bob and kind blue eyes behind reading glasses. She had my father's stubborn chin and his way of tilting her head when she was thinking. "Hi, Mom." I tried to keep my voice normal, but she knew me too well. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." The irony of her words was almost too much to bear. "We need to talk." She set down her paintbrush immediately, her maternal instincts kicking in. "Are you sick? Did something happen at work?" "Mom, I need you to sit down." She moved to the small couch she kept in the studio for when she wanted to step back and look at her work. I sat beside her, trying to figure out how to begin. "What I'm about to tell you is going to be very hard to believe, but I need you to listen to the whole story before you say anything, okay?" She nodded, her face growing serious. "Dad isn't dead, Mom. He's alive, and I saw him today." She stared at me for a long moment, then reached up to feel my forehead. "Are you feeling all right, honey? Do you have a fever?" "I'm not sick. I'm not having a breakdown. Dad is alive. He faked his death 10 years ago to protect us from some very dangerous people, and now those people have found us again." The color drained from her face. "Melody, that's impossible. I buried your father. We both did." "We buried someone, but it wasn't Dad." I pulled out my phone and showed her the text message. This came last night at 11:47. She took the phone with shaking hands and read the message. I watched her face cycle through confusion, disbelief, and finally a strange kind of hope. "This could be from anyone," she said, but her voice was uncertain. "Someone could have gotten his old phone number somehow." "Mom, he knew about the locket, the one I lost at the beach when I was 16, the one I never told anyone about except him." Her hands flew to her mouth. "Oh my God." I spent the next hour telling her everything my father had told me, about his real job, about the phantom banking investigation, about the threats against our family, and his decision to fake his death. She listened in stunned silence, occasionally asking questions, but mostly just absorbing the impossible truth. When I finished, she sat quietly for a long time, staring at her hands. "I always wondered," she said finally. "What do you mean?" "There were things that never made sense. The closed casket, for one. Your father was always so vain about his appearance. He would have wanted people to see him looking peaceful, dignified. And the heart attack seemed so sudden. He had just had a physical exam 6 months earlier, and the doctor said his heart was perfect." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden where she and my father had planted roses on their 10th wedding anniversary. But I think part of me didn't want to question it too closely because the alternative was too painful to consider. What alternative? She turned back to me, tears streaming down her face. That he had chosen to leave us, that our life together hadn't been enough to make him happy. It was easier to believe he was dead than to believe he had abandoned us. Mom, he didn't abandon us. He was trying to protect us. By lying to us for 15 years? By letting us believe he was dead? By missing 10 years of our lives? Her voice was rising, anger finally breaking through the shock. What kind of protection is that? I didn't have an answer for her. I had been asking myself the same questions. He wants us to leave town, tonight. He thinks we're in danger. Leave and go where? For how long? What about my job at the library? What about your students? What about our lives? Mom, our lives won't matter if we're dead. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the photograph on the floor. You know what the worst part is? Part of me is happy. Part of me is thrilled that my father is alive, that I might get to see him again. And I hate myself for feeling that way after everything he's put us through. That doesn't make you weak. That makes you human. Does it? Or does it make me pathetic? A woman so desperate for love that she's willing to forgive even this? I didn't know how to answer that. I was struggling with my own conflicted feelings about my father's return from the dead. We don't have to forgive him. We just have to survive this. She nodded slowly, then stood up with the kind of determined energy I remembered from my childhood when she would spring into action during family emergencies. Okay, if we're doing this, we're doing it right. Help me pack. For the next 2 hours, we moved through the house like women possessed. My mother packed clothes, medications, and some of her painting supplies. I gathered important documents, photos, and anything else that seemed essential. We worked mostly in silence, both of us processing the enormity of what we were doing. As we packed, I found myself noticing details about the house that I had never paid attention to before. The way my father's reading glasses were still on the nightstand in my parents' bedroom, as if my mother couldn't bring herself to move them. The family photos lining the hallway, chronicling birthdays and holidays and ordinary moments that now felt precious beyond measure. I need to tell you something else, my mother said as we loaded our suitcases into my car. Something I've never told anyone. I looked at her expectantly. The night before your father left for that business trip, the one where he supposedly died, we had a fight. A terrible fight about money and the future and whether he was happy with our life together. She wiped tears from her eyes. The last words I said to him were that maybe he should just leave if he was so miserable. And then he did leave, and I thought, Mom, no, you can't blame yourself for what happened. I blamed myself for 10 years. I thought maybe he had that heart attack because of the stress from our fight.
I thought maybe if I had been a better wife, a more supportive partner, he would have lived longer. None of this was your fault, wasn't it? Maybe if I had been paying more attention, I would have noticed that something was wrong. Maybe I could have helped him instead of making things worse. We stood in her driveway under the streetlights, surrounded by the quiet suburban night. And I realized that both of us had been carrying guilt about my father's supposed death for 10 years. Guilt that now seemed both justified and completely misplaced. We need to go, I said, looking around nervously. Every shadow seemed potentially threatening now. Where exactly are we going? I pulled out my phone and looked up the Ocean View Inn in Maine. It was a small bed and breakfast on the coast, the kind of place that catered to couples celebrating anniversaries and retirees looking for a peaceful getaway. Perfect for 2 women trying to disappear for a while. I'll call and see if they have availability, I said. The owner, a friendly woman named Patricia, was delighted to accommodate our last-minute reservation. She had 2 rooms available with an ocean view, and she assured us that October was a beautiful time to visit the Maine coast. "Are you celebrating something special?" she asked cheerfully. "Something like that," I replied, looking at my mother, who was staring at her house like she was seeing it for the last time. The drive to Maine took 8 hours, including stops for gas and coffee. We drove through the night, taking turns behind the wheel and trying to make normal conversation about the scenery and the weather. But underneath our casual chatter was a tension that made every passing car seem potentially threatening. My mother fell asleep somewhere around 3 in the morning, curled up in the passenger seat like a child. I drove through the darkness, radio turned low, thinking about everything my father had told me. The more I thought about it, the more questions I had. If he had really been watching us for 10 years, why hadn't he ever tried to contact us before? What had changed that made it necessary to reveal himself now? And most importantly, how did we know that any of this was real? The photograph of my mother and me at the farmer's market was disturbing, but it could have been taken by anyone for any reason. The badge and identification my father had shown me could have been fake. Even the news article about his former partner could have been coincidence. But then I thought about the way he had known about the locket, about details from my childhood that only he could have known. I thought about the familiar way he drank his coffee and ran his hand through his hair when he was nervous. Those things couldn't be faked, could they? By the time we reached the Ocean View Inn, I was exhausted and paranoid and no closer to understanding what was real and what wasn't. The bed and breakfast was exactly as I had imagined it, a Victorian house painted pale yellow with white trim, surrounded by gardens that were showing their fall colors. Patricia greeted us at the door with warm smiles and fresh blueberry muffins. "You must be the Andersons," she said, using the fake names I had given her when I made the reservation. "Welcome to Ocean View Inn. I think you're going to love it here." Our rooms were on the second floor, connected by a small sitting area with windows that looked out over the rocky coastline. The ocean stretched endlessly toward the horizon, gray and restless under the October sky. "It's beautiful," my mother said, standing at the window with her first genuine smile I had seen in days. "It is," I agreed, though I couldn't shake the feeling that we were exposed here, visible to anyone who might be looking for us. We spent the first day trying to settle in and act like normal tourists. We walked along the beach, visited local shops, and ate lobster rolls at a restaurant overlooking the harbor. My mother bought postcards and talked about maybe taking up watercolor painting again. For a few hours, it almost felt like the spontaneous mother-daughter getaway I had told Patricia it was. But I couldn't stop checking my phone, waiting for another message from my father or the mysterious number he had given me. I found myself studying every stranger we passed, wondering if they were watching us or if I was just being paranoid. On our second evening at the inn, my mother and I were having dinner at a small table by the window when she suddenly went very still. "Melody, don't turn around, but there's a man at the bar who's been watching us since we came in." My heart started racing. "What does he look like?" "Tall, dark hair, wearing a navy jacket. He's been nursing the same beer for 20 minutes and he hasn't taken his eyes off our table." I fought the urge to turn around and look. Instead, I pulled out my phone and pretended to be showing my mother photos while actually opening the camera app and switching to selfie mode. In the reflection on my screen, I could see the man she was talking about. He was perhaps 40 years old, with the kind of bland, forgettable face that could belong to anyone. But there was something about the way he was sitting, alert but trying to appear casual, that set off alarm bells in my mind. "What do we do?" my mother whispered. "We finish our dinner like nothing is wrong, then we go back to our room and call the number Dad gave us. And if he follows us, then we'll know for sure that this isn't just paranoia." We forced ourselves to eat slowly, making normal conversation about the weather and the food, while keeping track of the man in the navy jacket. When we finally got up to leave, he remained at the bar, but I could see him watching our reflection in the mirror behind the bottles of liquor. Back in our room, I locked the door and pulled out the phone number my father had given me. It was answered on the first ring by a woman with a crisp, professional voice. "Treasury Department, Special Agent Morrison speaking." "This is Melody Wellington. I was given this number by someone who said to call if I noticed anything unusual." There was a pause. "Ms. Wellington, where are you right now?" "Ocean View Inn in Bar Harbor, Maine. There's a man who's been watching us. I don't know if it's related to what my father told me about, but..." "Ma'am, I need you to listen very carefully. Do not leave your room. Do not answer the door for anyone except law enforcement. We're sending agents to your location immediately." "How do you know where we are?" "Your father provided us with your credit card information so we could monitor your location and ensure your safety. The agents will be there within 30 minutes. "Agent Morrison, is my father really who he says he is? Is any of this real?" Another pause. "Ms. Wellington, your father is Marcus Wellington, special agent with FinCEN, and yes, everything he told you about the investigation and the threats to your family is real.
The man watching you tonight is most likely Vincent Carruthers, a professional assassin with connections to the organization we've been tracking. My legs gave out, and I sank onto the bed. An assassin? Stay calm and stay in your room. Help is on the way. She hung up, leaving me staring at the phone in my shaking hands. What did they say? My mother asked. They're sending agents, and the man downstairs is apparently a professional killer. My mother's face went white. This is really happening, isn't it? All of this is really happening? Before I could answer, there was a soft knock at our door. My mother and I looked at each other in terror. Room service, called a male voice. We didn't order room service, I whispered. The knock came again, more intensely this time. Ma'am, I have a delivery for you. I grabbed my mother's hand and pulled her into the bathroom, locking the door behind us. Through the thin walls, we could hear someone trying the handle of our room door. Federal agents are on their way, I whispered into her ear. We just have to wait. But then we heard the sound that made my blood run cold. A key turning in the lock. Good evening, ladies, called the same voice that had claimed to be room service. I know you're in there. Let's make this easy on everyone. I heard footsteps moving through our room, opening closets and checking behind furniture. My mother was gripping my hand so tightly that her nails were cutting into my skin. I'm not here to hurt you, he continued conversationally. I'm just here to deliver a message. Your father wants to see you. He's waiting downstairs in the lobby.
How much did he know about us? Tell my father we'll be right down, I called through the door, trying to keep my voice steady. I am afraid I can't do that. See, your father isn't really your father anymore. He's been dead for 10 years, remember? The man who's been pretending to be him, well, let's just say he's not as altruistic as he appears to be. What do you mean? I mean, Marcus Wellington didn't fake his death to protect his family. He faked his death because he was the mole in the federal task force. He was selling information to the very criminals he was supposed to be investigating. And when his colleagues got too close to discovering his betrayal, he had to disappear. I felt like the floor was falling away beneath me. That's not true. Oh, but it is. And now he's back because he needs something from you. Something that could expose his real crimes and send him to prison for the rest of his life. The bathroom door shook as he tested its strength. You see, before he disappeared, your dear old dad hid evidence of his criminal activities, evidence that could implicate some very important people in some very serious crimes. And the only person who knows where he hid it is you, Melody. I don't know anything about any evidence, maybe not consciously, but think back to those last few weeks before his supposed death. Did he give you anything to keep safe? A box? An envelope? A flash drive? Did he ask you to store something for him? I ransacked my memory, trying to think of anything my father might have given me, but all I could remember was the normal routine of my senior year of college. Classes, papers, part-time job at the campus library. There's nothing, I said. Think harder, Melody. Think about that last conversation you had with him. The last conversation. I closed my eyes and tried to remember. He had called me the night before his business trip, just to check in and say he loved me. It had been a normal call, the kind we had several times a week. But wait, there had been something. He asked me to keep his spare key, I said suddenly, to his office. He said he might need me to pick up some files while he was gone. Ah, the voice said with satisfaction. And did you ever use that key? No, he died before he got back from his trip. But you still have it. I thought about the small dish on my kitchen counter where I kept random items like spare buttons and old receipts. My father's office key had been sitting there for 10 years, completely forgotten. Even if I still have it, his office was cleaned out years ago. There's nothing there. Oh, but that's where you're wrong. Marcus Wellington was nothing if not thorough. He knew that someday someone might come looking for what he hid, so he made sure it would be somewhere only his beloved daughter could access. The bathroom door rattled again, harder this time. The key isn't just to his office, Melody. It's to a safety deposit box that he registered in your name. A box that contains enough evidence to bring down half the organized crime families on the East Coast, and some very prominent politicians who were taking money from them. I don't understand. Why would he register anything in my name? Because he knew that if anything happened to him, you would be the only person he could trust to keep it safe. But also because he knew that having that evidence in your name would make you valuable to his enemies. Insurance, you might say. My mother was staring at me with wide, terrified eyes. I could see her trying to process everything she was hearing about the man she had been married to for 25 years. So you see, the voice continued, the man who contacted you isn't trying to protect you. He's trying to use you. He needs you to retrieve that evidence so he can either destroy it or sell it to the highest bidder. Either way, once he has what he wants, you and your mother become liabilities. You're lying. Am I? Think about it, Melody. If he really wanted to protect you, why didn't he stay dead? Why risk exposing you to danger just to have a coffee and catch up on old times? The answer is simple, because he needs something from you. The bathroom window was too small to climb through, and we were on the second floor anyway. We were trapped. Here's what's going to happen, the voice said. You're going to come out of that bathroom, and we are going to take a little ride. You're going to help me retrieve whatever your father hid in that safety deposit box. And then, if you're very good and very cooperative, I might let you and your mother live. And if we don't cooperate, well, let's just say that Patricia is going to have a very difficult time cleaning the carpets in this room. Just then, I heard the sound of sirens in the distance, getting closer. Ah, your federal friends. Well, that does complicate things. The bathroom door exploded inward, splintered wood flying everywhere. Vincent Carruthers stood in the doorway holding what looked like a small sledgehammer in one hand and a gun in the other. He was exactly as unremarkable as he had appeared in the restaurant. Medium height, brown hair, the kind of face you would forget 5 minutes after meeting him. But his eyes were cold and empty in a way that made me understand immediately that he would kill us without a moment's hesitation. Ladies, we're leaving, now. The police are coming, my mother said, her voice shaking. Federal agents, actually. And yes, they are, which means we need to move quickly. He gestured with the gun toward the window. There's a fire escape. We're going to climb down it very quietly and walk to my car like we're old friends taking a moonlight stroll. We're not going anywhere with you, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. Oh, but you are. Because if you don't, I'm going to start shooting people in this lovely little inn until you change your mind. Patricia first, I think. She seems like a nice lady. Probably has grandchildren. The sirens were getting louder. Move, he said sharply. We climbed out the window onto the fire escape, my mother going first with her hands visibly shaking on the metal railings. The October night was cold and windy, and I could smell the salt air from the ocean. Below us, the inn's garden was dark except for a few scoutered landscape lights. I could see a Dodge sedan parked on the street beyond the property, presumably Carruthers' car. We were halfway down when the fire escape suddenly shuddered and groaned. Careful, Carruthers said from above. This thing is probably 100 years old. That's when I realized we might have an opportunity. The fire escape was old and poorly maintained. If it were to collapse while Carruthers was on it... I looked down at my mother, who was still a few steps below me. Her eyes met mine, and I saw that she was thinking the same thing. We were almost to the bottom when she suddenly stumbled and grabbed the railing with both hands, shaking it violently. I'm sorry, she called up to Carruthers. I lost my balance. The entire structure groaned and swayed. Carruthers cursed and tried to steady himself, the gun wavering in his hand. Move faster, he ordered. But my mother kept stumbling, each time grabbing the railings and shaking the fire escape. I joined in, pretending to lose my footing and grasping at the metal supports. The bolts holding the fire escape to the building were old and corroded. With each shake, I could see them working looser. What are you doing? Carruthers demanded, but now he was focused on maintaining his own balance. That's when the federal agents burst through the inn's back door.
Federal agents, drop your weapon. Carruthers spun around, trying to aim at the agents while maintaining his grip on the swaying fire escape. The sudden movement was too much for the deteriorating structure. With a screech of tearing metal, the fire escape pulled away from the building. My mother and I jumped the remaining few feet to the ground and rolled away as the entire structure crashed down on top of Vincent Carruthers. The gun went flying, disappearing into the darkness somewhere among the inn's flower beds. The federal agents were on us immediately, helping us to our feet and checking us for injuries. Carruthers was pinned under a section of twisted metal, unconscious but breathing. "Are you hurt?" one of the agents asked. She was a woman in her 40s with short gray hair and kind eyes. "I'm Special Agent Morrison. We spoke on the phone." "We're okay," I said, though I was shaking so hard I could barely stand. "We're going to get you both to a safe location," she said. "But first, I need to ask you some questions about what this man told you." Over the next hour, I repeated everything Carruthers had said about my father being a mole, about the safety deposit box, about evidence that could bring down crime families and corrupt politicians. Agent Morrison listened carefully, taking notes and occasionally asking for clarification. "Is any of it true?" I asked finally. "Was my father really selling information to criminals?" Agent Morrison was quiet for a long moment. "Ms. Wellington, there are aspects of your father's case that are classified. What I can tell you is that Vincent Carruthers is a known associate of the criminal organization your father was investigating. Anything he told you should be considered suspect." "But is there really a safety deposit box in my name?" "We're looking into that." It wasn't the reassurance I was hoping for. My mother and I were taken to a secure facility in Portland, a nondescript office building that housed a field office for the Treasury Department. We were given a small apartment on the third floor with round-the-clock protection while the agents investigated Carruthers' claims. "How long will we have to stay here?" my mother asked Agent Morrison. "Until we can determine the extent of the threat against you and neutralize it." "And my father?" "We're working to locate him as well." That night, lying in a narrow bed in a sterile government apartment, I stared at the ceiling and tried to make sense of everything that had happened. 3 days ago, I had been an elementary school teacher with a quiet, predictable life. Now I was in protective custody, my supposedly dead father was alive, and possibly a criminal, and professional assassins were trying to kidnap me. My phone, which the agents had returned to me after checking it for security threats, buzzed with a text message. The sender was listed as unknown, but I knew immediately who it was from. "I'm sorry you had to go through that tonight. Carruthers is lying about most of what he told you, but not everything. There is something I hid, and I do need your help retrieving it, but it's not what he thinks it is, and it's not for the reasons he claimed. Meet me tomorrow at noon at the Portland Headlight. Come alone. Trust me one more time. Dad." I stared at the message for a long time, my thumb hovering over the delete button. Everything I thought I knew about my father had been called into question tonight. Maybe he really was a corrupt agent who had faked his death to avoid prosecution. Maybe he really was using me to retrieve evidence that could be sold to criminals. Maybe everything he had told me about protecting his family was a lie. But maybe Carruthers was the one who was lying. There was only one way to find out. I deleted the message and closed my eyes, but sleep didn't come. Tomorrow, I would have to decide whether to trust the father who had been dead for 10 years or the federal agents who were supposed to protect me. Either way, I had the feeling that the truth I discovered would change everything I thought I knew about my family, my past, and myself. The next morning brought gray skies and a decision I wasn't prepared to make. Agent Morrison knocked on my door at 8 a.m. sharp, carrying coffee and what looked like official documents. "She found the safety deposit box," she said without preamble. "It's registered at First National Bank in Portland under your name, opened 11 years ago. Your father used a power of attorney document to establish it." My mother looked up from her breakfast, her face pale. "What's in it?" "We don't know yet. We need Ms. Wellington's authorization and physical presence to access it." I thought about the text message I had received the night before, the one I had deleted. My father wanted to meet me at Portland Headlight at noon. The bank was probably 20 minutes from the lighthouse. "When do you want to go?" "This afternoon would be ideal. We have a warrant, but the bank is being cautious about the unusual circumstances." "What unusual circumstances?" Agent Morrison sat down across from me, her expression serious. "Melody, I need to be honest with you about something. We've been investigating your father's case for the past 6 months, ever since we received intelligence that someone was trying to reactivate the phantom banking network he helped expose. Someone like who? We're not entirely sure, but we know that whoever it is has been systematically eliminating anyone who had knowledge of the original investigation. Agent Crawford was just the beginning." My stomach dropped. "How many others?" 3 more agents have died under suspicious circumstances in the past month, all ruled accidents or suicides, just like Crawford. all connected to your father's case. My mother reached across the table and took my hand. So Marcus was right. We really are in danger. Yes and no, Agent Morrison said carefully. You're in danger, but perhaps not for the reasons your father told you. What do you mean? She opened one of the folders she had brought and pulled out a photograph. It showed my father, but he looked different somehow, harder. He was standing next to a man in an expensive suit outside what looked like a casino. This was taken 18 months before your father's supposed death. The man with him is Antonio Salvatore, head of the Salvatore crime family. They were photographed together on 17 occasions over a 6-month period. I stared at the photo, trying to reconcile this version of my father with the man who had taught me to ride a bicycle and helped me with my science projects. That doesn't prove anything, I said. He was undercover. Meeting with criminals was part of his job. You're right. Meeting with them was part of his job, but this wasn't about the investigation. She pulled out another document. These are bank records showing regular deposits into an account under a false name that we've traced back to your father. Over $2 million over 18 months, all coming from businesses owned by the Salvatore family. My mother made a small sound, like air being let out of a balloon. He was being paid by the people he was supposed to be investigating. Agent Morrison continued, and when his colleagues got close to discovering his betrayal, he faked his death and disappeared with the money. But he came back, I said weakly. He contacted me. If he really stole $2 million and was living in hiding, why would he risk coming back? Because the money is gone and he needs more. The phantom banking network that's being reactivated would be worth hundreds of millions of dollars to whoever controls it. Your father knows how the system works better than anyone. He's positioning himself to take control of it. I felt sick to my stomach. Everything my father had told me about protecting his family, about being in danger from the criminals he had investigated, was a lie. He was the criminal. What about Vincent Carruthers? If Dad is working with the crime families, why did Carruthers try to kidnap us? Carruthers doesn't work for the Salvatore family. He works for their rivals, the Torino organization. They want to stop your father from reactivating the phantom banking network because it would give the Salvatores a significant advantage in money laundering operations. My mother had been sitting quietly through all of this, but now she looked up with tears in her eyes. So our daughter is caught in the middle of a war between criminal organizations. I am afraid so.
Both sides want to use her to get to her father, just for different reasons. What's in the safety deposit box? I asked. We believe it contains the technical specifications and access codes for the phantom banking system. Your father hid it as insurance, in case he ever needed to bargain for his life or his freedom. I thought about the message my father had sent, asking me to meet him at the lighthouse. He needed my help retrieving whatever was in that box, just like Carruthers had claimed, but not to sell it to criminals or destroy evidence of corruption, to use it himself to become a criminal. What happens if I don't cooperate? I asked. What if I refuse to help either side? Agent Morrison's expression was grim. Then both sides will probably try to eliminate you to prevent the other from using you. I'm sorry, Melody, but you're in this whether you want to be or not. My phone buzzed with another text message. This time, it was from a number I didn't recognize. Your federal friends are lying to you about almost everything. The safety deposit box doesn't contain banking codes. It contains evidence of government corruption that goes all the way to the top. Your father was trying to expose it when they forced him to disappear. Meet me at the Eastern Promenade at 11 a.m. if you want to know the truth. Come alone. A friend. I showed the message to Agent Morrison, who read it with a frown. Don't even think about it, she said immediately. This is obviously another attempt to get you alone and vulnerable. But what if they're telling the truth? What if you're the ones who are lying to me? Melody, think about what you're saying. We're federal agents. We're the good guys. Vincent Carruthers told me my father was a corrupt agent selling information to criminals. You're telling me my father was a corrupt agent selling information to criminals. The only difference is which criminals you think he was working for. Agent Morrison was quiet for a moment. You make a fair point, but consider this. We rescued you from Carruthers. We've provided you with protection. We have no reason to lie to you. Don't you? If my father really does have evidence of government corruption, wouldn't you have every reason to want to suppress it? My mother looked back and forth between us like she was watching a tennis match. Melody, what are you thinking? I'm thinking that everyone who's talked to me in the past 3 days has claimed to be protecting me while trying to use me for their own purposes. Dad says he's protecting me from criminals, but he needs my help getting into a safety deposit box. Carruthers says he's protecting me from Dad, but he also needs my help getting into the same safety deposit box. And now Agent Morrison says she's protecting me from both of them, but she also needs my help getting into the same safety deposit box. That's different, Agent Morrison protested. We're law enforcement. We have legal authority. Do you? Do you have a warrant to access a safety deposit box that's in my name? Or do you just have my cooperation because I'm scared and don't know who to trust? Agent Morrison didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. I want to see the warrant, I said. She pulled out another folder and showed me an official-looking document. But as I read it, I realized it was a request for a warrant, not an actual warrant. It had been submitted, but not yet approved. So you don't actually have legal authority to access the box, I said. We will have it by this afternoon. Maybe. Or maybe the judge will deny the request. Either way, right now you need my voluntary cooperation just as much as everyone else does. My mother was staring at me with something that looked like pride. What do you want to do, sweetheart? I thought about it for a long moment. 3 different parties were claiming to have my best interests at heart while trying to use me to access something my father had hidden 10 years ago. The only way to know who was telling the truth was to find out what was actually in that box. I want to go to the bank, I said finally, but I want to go alone. Absolutely not, Agent Morrison said immediately. It's too dangerous. More dangerous than staying here while multiple criminal organizations hunt for me? More dangerous than trusting federal agents who may or may not be corrupt themselves? Melody, you're being paranoid. Am I, or am I being appropriately cautious in a situation where everyone has lied to me about something? I stood up from the table and walked to the window. The federal building was surrounded by city streets filled with normal people going about their normal lives. I envied them. Here's what I'm going to do, I said, turning back to Agent Morrison. I'm going to the bank at 2 o'clock this afternoon to open that safety deposit box. You can follow me if you want, but you're not coming inside with me. I'm going to see what's in there, and then I'm going to decide for myself who to trust. And if it's dangerous, what if it opening that box triggers some kind of alarm or trap? Then I guess I'll deal with that when it happens. Agent Morrison stood up as well, her professional composure cracking slightly. Miss Wellington, I'm trying to protect you. Please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. I'm not making it difficult. I'm making it honest. For the first time in 3 days, I'm going to get information that hasn't been filtered through someone else's agenda. My mother spoke up quietly. I'm going with her. Mom, no, it's too dangerous. If it's too dangerous for me, it's too dangerous for you. We're in this together, Melody. We have been since the moment your father sent that first text message. Agent Morrison looked back and forth between us, clearly frustrated. Fine, but we'll be watching from outside, and if anything goes wrong, if you're in there for more than 30 minutes, we're coming in. Agreed, I said. The rest of the morning passed slowly. I tried to read, tried to watch television, tried to have normal conversations with my mother, but my mind kept returning to that safety deposit box and what it might contain. Evidence of my father's corruption? Proof of government conspiracy? Banking codes worth hundreds of millions of dollars? Or something else entirely? At 1:30, Agent Morrison drove my mother and me to First National Bank in downtown Portland. It was a solid, imposing building that probably had been there for over a century, the kind of place where important people kept important secrets. Remember, Agent Morrison said as we got out of the car, 30 minutes maximum, and if you see anything that looks dangerous or suspicious, you leave immediately. What if what's in the box is dangerous? What if it's something that could hurt people if it falls into the wrong hands? Then you call me immediately and we handle it through proper channels. What if you are the wrong hands? She didn't have an answer for that. The bank manager, a nervous man in his 50s named Mr. Patterson, was clearly uncomfortable with the unusual situation. He had probably never had federal agents waiting outside while a customer accessed a safety deposit box that had been sealed for over a decade. I'll need to see identification, he said, checking my driver's license against the signature card on file. And you'll need to sign here acknowledging that you're accessing the box voluntarily. The signature card showed my father's handwriting from 11 years ago, back when I was still in college and the most complicated thing in my life was deciding on a major. The signature looked exactly like his, but now I wondered if anything about him had ever been real. Mr. Patterson led my mother and me down to the basement vault, a climate-controlled room lined with hundreds of small metal doors. Box 1247 was in the middle section, requiring 2 keys to open, one held by the bank and one that my father had apparently mailed to me years ago. I never received a key, I told Mr. Patterson.
According to our records, it was mailed to your college address in September 2014, just a few weeks before the account holder's reported death. September 2014. I tried to remember what had been happening in my life then. Senior year, job interviews, thesis research. I had been living in a small apartment near campus, sharing it with 2 roommates who were notorious for not checking the mail regularly. Is there a way to access the box without the key? We can drill it open, but that requires additional authorization and paperwork. I thought about Agent Morrison waiting outside, probably getting more impatient by the minute. I thought about my father, who might or might not be meeting me at Portland Head Light in less than 2 hours. I thought about Vincent Carruthers, who was hopefully in federal custody, but whose associates were probably still looking for me. "Drill it," I said. It took 20 minutes for the bank's locksmith to arrive and another 15 minutes to drill out the lock mechanism. My mother stood beside me the entire time, her hand resting supportively on my shoulder. When the door finally swung open, we found ourselves looking at a single manila envelope, thick but not particularly large. Written on the outside in my father's handwriting was a single word: Melody. I took the envelope with trembling hands and opened it carefully. Inside were 3 items: a letter addressed to me, a flash drive, and a small brass key. I unfolded the letter and began to read aloud so my mother could hear. My dearest Melody, if you are reading this, then something has gone wrong with my investigation and I have had to disappear to protect you and your mother. I know you must have many questions and I know you probably feel betrayed and abandoned. I am sorry for that, more sorry than I can express in words. The flash drive contains evidence of a conspiracy that reaches the highest levels of government. I discovered that several senior officials in the Treasury Department and the FBI were taking money from organized crime families in exchange for information about federal investigations. When I tried to report this to my superiors, I realized that some of them were involved as well. The brass key is for a second safety deposit box at Maine Federal Credit Union in Bar Harbor, box number 892. Inside that box, you will find documents that prove everything I am telling you is true, as well as enough money to keep you and your mother safe while you decide what to do with this information. I want you to know that everything I told you about loving you and being proud of you was real. The work I did, the lies I had to tell, the life I had to leave behind, all of it was worth it if it meant protecting you from the people who would use you to get to me. Trust no one completely, not even federal agents who claim to be helping you. The corruption goes deeper than anyone realizes. But if you decide to expose the truth, know that you will have my love and support, even if I cannot be there to give it to you in person. With all my love, Dad. I stared at the letter, reading it twice more to make sure I understood what it was saying. My father hadn't been a corrupt agent selling information to criminals. He had been an honest agent who discovered corruption and had been forced to disappear when he tried to expose it. "Melody," my mother said softly, "we need to go. We've been here almost 30 minutes. I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope along with the flash drive and the brass key. But as we walked back upstairs toward the lobby, my mind was racing. If my father was telling the truth, then Agent Morrison and her colleagues were the corrupt officials he had been trying to expose. They had been lying to me about everything, about his supposed criminal activities, about the phantom banking investigation, about the reason I was in danger. But if Agent Morrison was telling the truth, then the letter was an elaborate lie designed to make me distrust law enforcement so my father could manipulate me more easily. There was only one way to find out which version was real: the second safety deposit box in Bar Harbor.
We emerged from the bank to find Agent Morrison waiting by her car, checking her watch impatiently. "Well?" she asked as we approached. "Just some old family documents, birth certificates, insurance papers, that kind of thing. Nothing about banking codes or criminal activities? Nothing like that." She studied my face carefully, clearly skeptical. "Can I see what you found?" "I'd rather not. Some of it's pretty personal. Ms. Wellington, I need to remind you that this is a federal investigation. Any evidence of criminal activity needs to be turned over to law enforcement." "I understand, but there wasn't any evidence of criminal activity." Agent Morrison clearly didn't believe me, but she couldn't force me to show her the contents of the envelope without a warrant. "Where would you like to go now?" I thought about the lighthouse where my father wanted to meet me and the credit union in Bar Harbor where he had hidden more evidence. Both were an hour away from Portland. "Actually," I said, "I think we'd like to go back to the safe house for now. This has been pretty overwhelming and I need some time to process everything." "Of course, that's understandable." But as we drove back through downtown Portland, I was already planning our escape. The safe house was a converted apartment on the 3rd floor of the federal building, with agents stationed in the hallway and surveillance cameras watching every entrance. Getting out without being noticed would be difficult, but not impossible. I waited until Agent Morrison left for a meeting with her supervisor, then told the agents in the hallway that my mother and I were tired and would be resting for the afternoon. Once we were alone in the apartment, I explained my plan. "The bathroom window opens onto the fire escape. If we can get down to the alley behind the building, we can walk to the parking garage 2 blocks away and rent a car." "Melody, are you sure about this? What if your father really is lying? What if we're putting ourselves in more danger?" "Mom, at this point, everyone is lying about something. The only way to find out the truth is to get that second safety deposit box and see what's really in it." She nodded slowly. "And then what?" "Then we decide who to trust based on facts instead of stories." Getting out of the building was easier than I expected. The fire escape was old but functional, and the alley behind the building was empty except for a few delivery trucks. We walked casually to the parking garage, rented a car using the credit card my father had given me, and were on the road to Bar Harbor within an hour. I knew the federal agents would realize we were gone eventually, but I hoped we would have enough time to reach the credit union before they caught up with us. The drive took 2 hours through scenic coastal Maine, past rocky shores and small fishing villages that looked like postcards. Under different circumstances, it would have been a pleasant mother-daughter road trip. "Are you nervous?" my mother asked as we pulled into the parking lot of Maine Federal Credit Union. "Terrified," I admitted, "but I need to know the truth." The credit union was much smaller than the bank, with only one employee working the counter. She was a young woman with friendly eyes who seemed delighted to have customers on what apparently was a slow afternoon. "I need to access a safety deposit box," I told her, showing my identification. She checked her computer system and nodded. "Box 892. You're the first person to access this box since it was opened." This time I did have the key, which my father must have mailed to me separately from the first one. It had probably been sitting in my kitchen drawer for 10 years, mixed in with spare buttons and old receipts, just like I had told Vincent Carruthers. The credit union's vault was much smaller than the bank's, with only about 50 boxes. Number 892 was in the bottom row, and it opened easily with the brass key. Inside was another manila envelope, much thicker than the first one. This envelope contained dozens of documents, photocopied bank statements, email printouts, surveillance photos, and what looked like financial records going back several years. There was also a handwritten note from my father. "If you made it this far, you're braver than I hoped you would need to be. The documents in this envelope prove that Agent Sarah Morrison, Agent David Crawford, and at least 6 other federal officials were taking money from the Torino crime family in exchange for information about federal investigations. When I tried to report this to my superiors, I realized that some of them were involved as well.
The brass key is for a second safety deposit box at Maine Federal Credit Union in Bar Harbor, box number 892. Inside that box, you will find documents that prove everything I am telling you is true, as well as enough money to keep you and your mother safe while you decide what to do with this information. I want you to know that everything I told you about loving you and being proud of you was real. The work I did, the lies I had to tell, the life I had to leave behind, all of it was worth it if it meant protecting you from the people who would use you to get to me. Trust no one completely, not even federal agents who claim to be helping you. The corruption goes deeper than anyone realizes. But if you decide to expose the truth, know that you will have my love and support, even if I cannot be there to give it to you in person. With all my love, Dad. I stared at the letter, reading it twice more to make sure I understood what it was saying. Agent Morrison, the woman who had rescued us from Vincent Carruthers, who had protected us at the safe house, who had claimed to be investigating my father's corruption, was herself the corrupt one. But the documents seemed to support his claims. Bank statements showing regular deposits into accounts linked to Morrison and other agents. Email correspondence discussing consulting fees and information sharing arrangements. Even photographs of Morrison.
She paused, her expression troubled. What? About a year before he died, he started talking about retirement a lot, about how we would be able to travel, maybe buy a house on the coast. I thought it was just wishful thinking, but maybe he was planning to access money that I didn't know about. I thought about the $2 million Agent Morrison had said my father stole from the Salvatore family. If he really had taken that money and hidden it somewhere, it would explain his talk about retirement and travel. But it would also mean that at least part of what Agent Morrison had told me was true. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. You missed our meeting at the lighthouse. I hope that means you found what you were looking for at the credit union. There's a diner called Coastal Catch on Route 1, about 10 miles north of where you are now. Meet me there in 1 hour. It's time to finish this. Dad. I showed the message to my mother, who read it with a mixture of hope and fear. He's been watching us, she said. He knows where we are. The question is, how? And more importantly, who else might be watching us too? I looked around the credit union, suddenly paranoid that we were being observed. But the young employee was busy with paperwork, and the parking lot outside looked empty except for our rental car. What do you want to do? My mother asked. I want to meet him. I want to hear his side of the story face to face with all the evidence laid out between us. And then? Then we decide once and for all who we can trust. The drive to Coastal Catch took 15 minutes through winding coastal roads. The diner was a classic 1950s-style establishment with red vinyl booths and a long counter lined with chrome stools. Only a few customers were scattered throughout the restaurant, mostly older locals enjoying late lunch. My father was sitting in a corner booth with his back to the wall, positioned so he could see both the entrance and the rear exit. He looked older and more tired than he had at our coffee shop meeting, but his eyes lit up when he saw us. Melody, Ruth. He stood up as we approached, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you for coming. My mother stopped a few feet away from him, her entire body tense. Hello, Marcus. You look beautiful, he said softly. Both of you do. Don't, my mother said sharply. Don't you dare try to charm your way through this. I want answers, Marcus. Real answers about what you've done to our family. He nodded and gestured for us to sit down. You deserve answers. Both of you do. I slid into the booth across from him and placed the manila envelope from the credit union on the table between us. I found your evidence, the documents about Agent Morrison and the others. His expression was unreadable. And what do you think about what you found? I think it's very convenient that you happen to have documented proof of a vast government conspiracy, almost too convenient. What do you mean? I leaned forward, studying his face carefully. I mean that for someone who was supposedly in hiding for 10 years, you seem to have been incredibly busy gathering evidence and setting up elaborate systems of safety deposit boxes and secret meetings. It's almost like you knew I would eventually need to follow this treasure hunt you created. I was trying to protect you. Were you? Or were you planning to use me from the very beginning? He was quiet for a long moment, his hands wrapped around his coffee cup. When he looked up, there was something different in his eyes, something that looked almost like relief. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for," he said finally. "What does that mean?" "It means you're right to be suspicious. About me, about Morrison, about everyone involved in this situation." My mother leaned forward. "Marcus, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that the story I told you about being an undercover federal agent was mostly true. The story I told you about discovering government corruption was mostly true. But the story I told you about why I faked my death?" He paused, looking out the window at the gray October afternoon. "That was a lie. I felt like I was falling down a rabbit hole with no bottom. What's the real reason? I didn't fake my death to protect you from criminals or corrupt agents. I faked my death because I was offered a deal that was too good to pass up, a chance to disappear with enough money to live comfortably for the rest of my life, in exchange for certain information about federal investigations." My mother's face went white. "You were the mole." "I was a mole. Not the only one, and not the most important one, but yes, I was selling information to the Torino family for almost 2 years before my supposed death." "Why?" I whispered. "Because I was tired, Melody. Tired of working dangerous cases for government salary while watching criminals live in luxury. Tired of risking my life to put away people who would be replaced by someone within a week. Tired of coming home to a normal suburban life and pretending that everything was fine while I carried around secrets that could get me killed." He turned to my mother, his eyes filled with regret. "I'm sorry, Ruth. I know that's not an excuse for what I did to you and Melody, but I felt trapped in a life that was slowly suffocating me." "So you decided to fake your own death and abandon your family?" my mother asked, her voice shaking with anger. "I decided to take the money and run, yes, but I also wanted to give you both a clean break. As far as you knew, your husband and father had died a hero in the line of duty. You could grieve and move on with your lives without the shame of knowing what I had really become." I stared at him across the table, this man who had read me bedtime stories and taught me to drive and walked me down the aisle at my college graduation in my imagination for 10 years. "But you came back. Why did you come back if you were living happily ever after with your blood money?" "Because the money is gone, and because the situation has gotten complicated in ways I didn't anticipate." "What do you mean, the money is gone?" "I spent it. Over 10 years living in different countries under different identities, the $2 million gradually disappeared. Bad investments, expensive habits, the cost of maintaining false documentation. By last year, I was nearly broke. So you decided to come back for more?" "I decided to come back because I learned that Morrison and her team were planning to reactivate the phantom banking network, but not for the Torinos, for themselves. They're planning to steal hundreds of millions of dollars from various criminal organizations and disappear, leaving their former criminal partners to take the blame." I tried to process what he was telling me. "And you want to stop them?" "I want to take their place. The phantom banking system that I helped investigate 10 years ago is worth more money than I ever dreamed of. If I can gain control of it before Morrison's team activates it, I can disappear again with enough money to last several lifetimes. And you need me to do that? I need the access codes and technical specifications that Morrison thinks are hidden in those safety deposit boxes. She was right about their existence, but wrong about their location. They're not in any safety deposit box. Where are they?" He smiled, but it was a sad expression. "They're in your head, Melody, hidden in a memory that you don't even know you have." Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.